So at this time, I'm going to invite the panelists up. First panelist that we have today is Sarfaraz Rehman, who is an executive coach and consultant, as well as a member of the executive committee on MAP. Our second panelist for today is Fahd Chinoy, Executive Director of Pakistan Cables. Our third panelist is Mr. Hussain Adenwala, Director and HR Consultant of HRFirst. Our fourth panelist is Mr. Amir Jamil Abbasi, Partner at KPMG. Our fifth panelist is Ali Raza Mehdi, SVP and CHRO at Engro Corporation. And our sixth panelist is Mr. Khalid Zaman Khan, Executive VP and Head of HR at Meezan Bank. Welcome, gentlemen. So just in taking this conversation a little bit further, I'm going to draw on some of your expertise here just to sort of let us know what's been happening within your organizations and how you've been exercising various aspects of talent management. And I think the first thing we'd like to start off with is the attraction aspect. So I'm going to pose this question openly to any of you that would like to answer it. And what I'd like to know is really how has your organization been going about attracting millennial talent? Has it been a concerted effort? Has it been something that you've had to run tweaked campaigns over? Have you done anything specific to ensure that you're attracting a younger workforce?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to answer that in two aspects, in two steps. So one is we separate the attraction part of the millennials as an activity. For Engro, we are in the process of answering a much more fundamental question, which is what is the core of the business? And what is the DNA? What do we stand for? All right, so if we answer that, then everything else is a consequence of that. So two major steps that have been taken is one, the chairman and Engro as a group has decided that moving forward, human capital management becomes the #1 priority for the group across the enterprise, ahead of financial capital, ahead of any other financial indicators. So by itself perhaps seems like a small statement, but actually talks volumes, because this is what defines who we will be, how we will conduct business, and what our DNA and culture will be. And the chairman has clearly said that as a public stated at all forums, at the board of directors, at every single forum, at educational institution with all the chief executive officers at Engro Corp. So that sets the stage, right? So that's the core. So now that we know who we are and how we're going to operate, the second step that we are undertaking as we speak, as I speak, is a complete internal company diagnostics. And what the diagnostics is doing is giving us reference points. And what do I mean by that? So a reference point is where we are in terms of our architecture internally for people or all people-related businesses. What else do we do in terms of our empowerment? How rigid are we in terms of decision making? How do we develop talent? Do we encourage innovation? So all that will be determined through our diagnostics. How we manage performance. You mentioned the formal performance management systems, the classical management systems, where ranking was preferred over feedback, over development. what are we going to do with that moving forward? So if we have to attract millennials and other people, we have to first fix the core. We have to understand what is happening within the organization. Anything else we do is a consequence action of that. So we do some wonderful things. The team here does wonderful things. So they go on student drives. They will coach, and they will mentor, and they will counsel, and they will guide college students all over Pakistan. So we do that. It's an activity. We have wonderful foundations working in Engro called Third Foundation, Engro Foundation. They use digital space to tell millennials or young people how the company contributes to country and society, because that's something millennials find it, something that they can relate to, or organizations they would like to work for. But these are just activities. So what we want is value to be determined by outcome rather than value to be determined by activity. So we're right in the process of fixing our core, and that will then determine how we move forward.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to speak to attraction and what the strategy has been specific to a millennial crowd?
I think, one thing that we should do is, a lot have been said that we go to the business schools and we try and attract millennials. One thing that we practiced before was less of a talk from the CEO or the director HR. And what we did, whether we went to LUMS or IBA or any other institute, we took the millennials with us. Because the millennials can only relate with the millennials, They believe more into their own age group. So when they were talking about their success stories, about how they have grown in that organization, it was all relating. And it was pulling, the people towards. So this is how we were trying to enhance our corporate brand.
Fantastic. So what do you feel some of the key developmental needs have been? I mean, you've got a fairly fresh crowd who majority are coming straight out of university, entering the workforce. So they're going, from academia to the corporate world in many cases. What do you think has been, the key thing that needs grooming, I guess, once you've admitted them into the workforce?
Well, I would like to say that, we've talked a lot today about constant feedback, about providing them with training opportunities, but I think real-life experience on projects where they can actually be impactful and make a difference and see the results of that while being partnered with someone within the leadership or at a senior level who can harness their mindset, their direction, is something that could really help with quick development and empowering them.
Interesting. Have you noticed that there's any sort of change in the development strategy and the way that learning is delivered as a result of having millennials on board? Has it changed the digitization, for example, of content?
I think obviously they're more engaged with the digital content, and certainly there's a way to sort of have shortened, more summarized versions of information being passed on to them. Whether we're doing that actively right now or not, I think we're just internally looking more at being more progressive and more involved on the training front. But certainly after today, we'll be keeping that perspective in mind as well.
Excellent. Have any of you tried micro-learning within your organization? So the short video snippets, for example, that are instructional in nature, or give a little bit of sort of business wisdom in 2 minutes or less. Has that been instituted across any of your organizations?
As part of our plan.
Part of the plan, okay.
So, so one of the things is you can't provide. So a career path for millennials is becoming much more of a challenge because they rather have access to learning rather than long-term career paths. Because I think moving forward, learning, reskill, upskill is going to be more the progress, the measure of progress and success rather than career plan. So I think if that's something we can provide and making learning available across the platform to everybody, and an integrated learning, which is a mix of digital, using digital space, bite-sized learning as you're talking about, formal classroom, coaching, mentoring, on the job. I think, so it'll have to be a mix now.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to shift sort of the focus onto engagement for a moment. And just looking at the generation gap, have any of your organizations really felt the generation gap? And if so, what was the strategy that was implemented in order to mitigate that?
Yeah, back in Engro Foods in 2006, when the company started, and of course, we mushroomed and grew very quickly. And really about 80% of the workforce would have been millennials. They weren't called millennials then, and the engagement stuff wasn't really talked about. There was more about how to connect to employees. And very quickly we found out that the people coming in large numbers from universities, colleges, were very, very different from the older generation, myself, maybe my management committee, etc. So we sort of, I won't say it was a structured plan. We realized the structures are coming down. The traditional organization, which is going up in pyramid fashion, is really more a mesh of wires connected together. And we actively went out to put that into shape. So we connected to the universities, the colleges. Some things Ali mentioned were actually commenced by Engro Foods in 2006-07. I myself ran 2 classes of BBA and IBA. It was all about this sort of stuff, about connecting the younger people to where they're going, what is the purpose, how do they fit into corporates, that sort of thing. Those connections made a lot of difference. As the structures came down, the individuals became more important. As the individuals became more important, their stories were very important. I spent, I would say, 90% of my time over the last 10 years when I was in Engro Foods being an HR person rather than a CEO. It was sitting at desks hearing stories about their families, about what they were doing, why they were doing it, what do they want to do in life. Those connections make a big difference. It becomes inspirational. And then we use one thing which I learned in my Pepsi days. Pakistanis get inspired by Pakistaniyat. And that we really used abundantly. So Engro Foods was all about opening up rural areas, bringing prosperity, flying the Pakistani flag, about making Pakistan look good. That meant the younger force was very, very engaged in what they wanted to do. The results then happened.
I'm curious to know if that had an impact on your overall corporate culture.
It did. It was, people could walk into my room and tell me that I didn't know what I was doing. Younger ones. I've had an intern walking in. He's now fairly senior in Reckitt Benckiser, but this is about 8 or 9 years ago, who walked in, sat down and said, look, I'm going. Today's my last day, but just want to tell you, I think you are doing these things wrong. I can tell you, in my days when I started at Unilever, if I wanted to see my manager, I would probably get a meeting 2 days down the road. So, just the open door culture, making people feel connected, protecting people in what they say. I could very easily, with one wrong sentence, bring the whole structure down. I deliberately set out not to do that.
Wow.
I would listen to a lot of people. I had a supply chain director who's now, mashallah, he's the CEO of Tharkol, which was mentioned just now. He would sit in management committee meetings and tell me, Sarfaraz, you just don't know what you're talking about. You just, get down on the ground and see things. And he would say it in those words. And it was fine, because he was also a friend, so one could laugh through it. That then created a very, very open culture. There are people here, some of them who have worked in Engro Foods. They would know exactly what went on there.
Interesting. How has this all impacted retention? What's been driving retention of millennials and of the larger workforce generally? Because I would imagine that there is probably a little bit of an intimidating factor when it comes to those who have more seniority who have been there longer and who are seeing this wave of very talented individuals come into the organization, it can almost be, intimidating / disengaging if not managed appropriately. What has been the retention strategy?
I think if I can talk about my firm, I'm in KPMG, I'm a location head in Karachi office, and all of the factors that were mentioned by colleagues apply to us as well. We have an organization which is about 1,700 plus headcount, and about 95% of them are basically millennials. And we have some, about half of them are on training contracts, and remaining half are basically at employee level. But the thing that actually helps in retention is the value-based culture that we have. Values are very important, as well as building trust along with the values. And these two things actually make a lot of difference. And globally also, a lot of emphasis is placed on the values, that we respect the individual, we have open and honest communication with them. And then the CSR activities that we carry out, actually that resonates a lot with our younger millennials, and they actually participate very actively in those activities. As we are having a couple of CSR activities tomorrow as well. And right now, our millennials are working in the office packing the books for children in a school of underprivileged children. So we are working in that area. That actually engages them, and that also helps in the retention. In addition to that, obviously the factors that you mentioned about the development through the technological tools, that we have a completely actually now technology-based culture now. We don't have any working paper files as such. We have everything on computer. So that actually attracts them a lot. So, and then there are additional technological tools like data and analytics. In addition to that, globally we are having this IBM Watson artificial intelligence tool. Obviously, it is not here yet, but people are very excited that it will someday come to Pakistan also. So this is something. And then one additional point that actually impacts them is the feedback culture. The feedback may not be the way that you are talking about, that it is gone, but in our organization is still there, and they do want a two-way feedback. They very much want to know what they're doing, how they are progressing, and their career path, how it is going, because they want to have different career paths. Not everyone is wanting to become a partner, for example. They want to actually carry out their development in the firm and then go on to different organizations also. This is also possible. And then global mobility is one important area which helps in our retention, where we are able to send our people on long-term and short-term secondments to Middle East, to UK and US. And that is a major attraction actually for them to actually join the firm. So those are the areas which actually, all of these things actually matter, you know. It's not just one point.
I can just add, I am representing Meezan Bank, and if you know how big the organization is, we have a headcount of 9,000 plus and having presence in 143. So it means that we cannot only rely on the people who are sitting at head office who can only come to our offices and we can have an interactive session with as well. What we did this year, I can give you an example, we did the online engagement survey. And the tagline for the engagement, I can see the marketing guy sitting here, the tagline of the engagement survey, your opinions matters. What happened when we completed the survey, we made number of reforms, and it is a gradual process. It took almost a year, and still a couple of suggestions which was put forward by the employees. So we communicate back to the employees with the same tagline. Your opinions matters. It means we want to reinforce the message that when we will launch this engagement survey after 2 years, your opinion matters should be, ingrained in their minds so that they can feel important, because it's so big organization, 143 cities, we have so many locations, so we want to engage them. Secondly, I can give you, like in any other board, like we have a HR committee where our senior people are there, but importance of the social media. I can give you an example of social media. There's a website known as Bankers Forum. This is an independent website or Facebook page where around 25,000 bankers, mostly baby boomers or millionaires, are registered. They're part of it, and they freely make their comments about increment, bonus, and everything. When we made when all the banks made announcement of their increment, they expressed their opinion. And what we did the research of it, we made a report of it and presented to the board HR committee. Although it's not a proper forum or registered forum, but we cannot ignore it because we have to find out where these millennials or Generation Y are expressing their concern, and you have to incorporate them and to be the part of your decision-making process.
Interesting. So, okay, if we have to combine those two, and looking at the decision-making process, looking at the results that come through from the employee engagement surveys, how then do you sort of implement the feedback that comes back through the surveys? So there's the communication aspect of it, certainly, where you communicate back the results. But then the actions that happen thereafter, is there a process associated with that?
Yeah, this is the process. I think the process is through the town hall meeting, number one. It's a process through the communication, through the emails, update on your intranet as well. What was the concern, issues raised by your employees, which segment, it's the segment of the employees, what are their concerns, and what the management committee, the ManCom, discuss these and address it. So it is a process of continuous feedback to them, because the SCARF model you just have mentioned, and I was just seeing some of the points you have mentioned, you have to keep them engaged so that the reinforcement can take place. Out of 9,000 employees, we have 77% of the baby boomers. So you can imagine the quantum of baby boomers in our organization. And I was just analyzing the average engagement with the organization is 2.9 years. As compared to Generation X or the others who are working, they have an average engagement with our organization is 6.7. So you can imagine we have to make policies in a way that we are able to engage, because they don't have the psyche of the millionaire is they don't have I can recall my fathers or all my uncles used to join in one organization and retired after 40 years. But there is no concept of loyalty. There is no right or wrong answer for this, but this is the way it's worked, this organization. So organization has to devise the strategies accordingly.
Interesting. I'm going to open this question up to everybody, on the panel. How well equipped do you feel, or how comfortable do you feel in dealing with millennial disruptors? So where really brand new ideas are coming out, maybe something that's completely different from, what you'd expect within the business. How have you been dealing with that?
From my perspective, I think it's very important that millennials are allowed to express themselves. The key is to find a balance between the experience and the disruption, and to be able to sort of pick out when the disruption is something that will work and when it's something that will backfire. So that's where I think the balance of the fresh blood and the new perspective, and you allowing them a platform to express that, but then also tempering that a little bit with a little bit of experience. So I would support that there should be disruption. Obviously, you can't sort of continue to operate in the way that you are in today's world, given the dynamics that there are, but at the same time, there has to be a balanced strike, because if you're just coming up with disruptive ideas all the time and just creating platforms for that, it'll just create chaotic confusion. So that
I think, in my view, the employee engagement is very important with the disruptors. You have to keep engaged with them and to actually understand what their requirements are in terms of career development, in professional development, and obviously the work-life balance is very important to them. There have been comments, for example, in our survey, that if my work-life balance is not right, I don't care about the reward then. I might leave the organization then. I would go to an organization where I have a balance, better work-life balance, rather than and have a lower reward than actually work-life balance, which is not right for me. So those kind of things matter, where you engage with the employees. And this is, by the way, our Global People Survey also is right now going on. And the most important point that comes out of that is the engagement with the staff. And most of our staff are millennials.
Yeah, please.
You know, I spent all my life, working life in FMCG, and it's all about trending the business. Where the trends go, the humans go. I know what the gentlemen, both of them, have said. The reality is I don't think you can control this process. This will drive you. And what you can do is you can follow and set up some sort of structure behind it. There will be disruptors, they will disrupt things, they will change the world. You'll just have to follow. I don't think you have much of a choice.
And maybe there's a viability process that, you know, sort of needs to be sort of loosely followed at least, you know, insofar as maybe not killing the idea as it comes up, but, you know, really still following a certain amount of structure, you know, that it at least gets vetted somewhere along the way and mentored.
Sort of something out of human history which actually happened. This is exactly what is happening. You had the pioneers who went out in the Wild West, and they went out into the, right up to California, through the desert and everything, and the roads and the rails followed afterwards. That's exactly what's going to happen. You'll have the pioneers who will drive through, and then you'll get some sort of structure following behind.
Interesting.
No, I was just going to say some companies have been very successfully experimented with incubation centers, right? It's just the nature of the business they want to be. They are incubators of innovation, of talent, of new ideas. It depends what kind of line of business you are in. So for example, we are an industrial conglomerate. It's very different from some of the businesses that these gentlemen have been. The patterns and some of the thinking about millennials tells us that they like to work for companies that they are consumers of as well. So they like to work for companies that they consume a product of. They like to get their goods or exercise a service. So for example, for an industrial conglomerate which is dependent on a manufacturing and engineering competence, what does it do? One is through this diagnostics that we're doing is, we determine, like Dr. Francesco said, our internal immune system. What do we keep safe? And we know because that's our safe line, we have to. But what do we do beyond, outside that circle to innovate or to go into an exponential mode? One area that we actually are exploring is the digital space, and Engro going into a digital organization in partnership with the international company. So again, it's entirely dependent on what your outlook is. But one thing is for sure, it is coming, it's going to disrupt, and it will shut down businesses if we don't address it soon enough. Our chairman spent an entire month overseas just trying to understand what this digital disruption is, what exponential technologies are doing, and then how does it affect us? And then what do we need to do to address it?
Interesting. If you had to project, let's say 5-10 years into the future, how do you think your talent strategy is going to change overall in terms of the way in which you're dealing with your workforce today and how you might deal with it in the future?
Actually, in our case, the strategy for acquiring talent in the next 5 to 10 years is going to change significantly, because we are focusing more on the advisory and consulting work, and we are trying to actually acquire subject matter specialist services. So those kind of people that we are looking at and hiring, obviously it actually is more costly resource, but at the same time, there is a lot of demand for those kind of services and advisory, because we have a number of different lines of service like forensics, IT advisory, risk compliance services. So we are trying to actually broaden the service lines there. And as you mentioned about those cross-functional activities, so we are trying to actually carry out that kind of cross-functional activity, as well as by various levels of staff as well. So trying to build teams, and in that, subject matter specialists are the most important part of our future strategy.
Interesting. Maybe for a futuristic view, maybe Dr. Jose will have some suggestions for us during his workshop on how hiring and selection and recruitment will be impacted, perhaps, by artificial intelligence and in the future. On that note, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of our panelists and invite a round of applause for our panelists. And yeah, we'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience, if anybody has any. I think we've got some mic runners as well. Got one in the front here.
Hello. Thank you, the esteemed panelists. I'm Umar Faruqi. I'm representing Engro Corp over here. I just want a question relating to the talent management that we were talking about. Talent management. Thank you. So different companies have different structures and different processes to identify the high potentials, as we call them. And the challenge that different companies are facing in the past 4 or 5 years is that the millennials, you identify them, you place them in succession planning, and then they run away in 3 to 5 years because, again, you can't stop them, and there are different opportunities. Probably companies are not addressing their needs. Gone are the days when you would identify top talent and they would stick with the company for 20 years, be your CEO, or serve in different positions. So first question is, if you identify top talents in these esteemed organizations that you belong from, how do you develop them? And in case, what is your strategy when they leave the organization? So in essence, the top talent management structure fails. If you are identifying them, in 2 to 3 years they leave, then you run the process again, then you identify them again. So first, how do you develop them? Second, what is the strategy to retain them? I have a fairly simple idea of how Engro Corp does it, if the other company's representative can identify it. Thank you.
I can briefly answer your question, the others then can add in. Basically what you are trying to actually determine is how do you retain the talent, and they are not going to stay with you for a long time. So the answer to your question is, at least in our organization, what we do is that we have a pipeline of intake that is going on a 6-monthly basis, and we're continuously hiring people, training them continuously, developing them, and the attrition level unfortunately is a bit high. But at the same time, we are developing the talent. We know that we are going to be able to use them for probably 2 or 3 years maximum, or 4 years. There are some who we might identify as career prospects who might ultimately go up to become as partners. But then there are others who actually themselves decide to actually go into the industry or in a profession, go out of the country. So it is like you are continuously having a pipeline of talent coming in to replace those who are going out. There is no way of stopping the attrition that is actually at a particular level. You have to actually plan for it and continuously invest in resources on an ongoing basis.
I can give you another dimension to it. Your retention strategy should be aligned with your reward and recognition strategy as well. These millennials that we talk about, they want attractive packages and more into cash terms. The other thing is they would like to go on a fast track careers, And the third element to it is they want to be frequently recognized. So you need to work on your R&R. So what we have been working with some of the companies is that you've got to come out of your traditional comp and ben mix. You've got to monetize some of your benefits. You've got to convert them into cash so that you can give flexibility to the millennials to spend it at their own choice. You've got to increase the pie of the variable pay, the performance recognizer, and you've got to control on your fixed costs or the guaranteed pay. In terms of your career, the changing trend globally is that when you talk of structures, organization structures, they are more fluid now. And they are delayering, so they are removing some of the layers, which adds to the challenge for HR to create meaningful careers for them. So we've worked with so many organizations where what we do, even if you have lesser number of grades or paths to move, you've got to work on a creative space so that within the grades you've got to create that kind of a career paths where you can quickly move them up. If it's not entirely vertical promotion, it could be a hybrid arrangement, it could be vertical ones as well. So this is how you keep on moving them so that they have this sense of that. The third pie is, I'm not going to go into the detail, but it's frequent recognition. So I take my photo, it's right there in the Facebook, where that kind of people, when talk about millennials. So you've got to change your recognition and reward strategy as well. And just one quick example, what we did in one of the companies that I worked for before, we formed a kind of a small arrangement, a cross-functional team. We call it Lily Engagement Team. And we included millennials in, and we said, this is the budget, how would you like to be recognized? So they came up with the wealth of ideas, and we were just trying to facilitate that process. So the recognition policy changed very rapidly over time. The ideas came from them, were utilized, and this is how we try to increase the level of engagement with them.
That sounds like agility in action, actually. I think much to that point, I think there is a huge value in looking at your short-term incentive plans versus your long-term incentive plans. A lot of companies are revamping the way that they view long-term incentives. Apart from just shares, they're looking at various other aspects that include health and wellness benefits, that include succession planning, that include a much broader package in terms of what the future looks like. And I think it's really worth understanding from the viewpoint of all staff, whether there is that generation element or not. It's really worth understanding what are the driving factors, what is important, or what are the priorities for each group of individuals within each organization, because that will differ drastically across different industries, across different geographies, for multinationals, for local companies. The profile of individuals is just so different from company to company that you really have to delve in deep and really extract from your engagement surveys and from your employee feedback mechanisms what is truly important to your workforce. And that's going to be unique, across the board. Hopefully that answered the question. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, my name is Mohammed Adil. Rising with the millennials, which means that, today we don't have an option. The baby boomers did well, Generation X did well, and we're hoping the millennials do well. If they're not facilitated, do you as the panel have examples of people who are millennials but they've not been facilitated and they change their mindset and are not able to contribute through the features that we've discussed earlier of things that make them millennials and which hopefully would attributes of them that would succeed? So do you have people moving from millennials in the mindset to the silent generation or Generation X?
I think probably a lot of them, if you ask me. Quite a few.
And why is that? But why?
I can tell you, well, I mean, there are 3-4 things I think so I can refer you to a great talk, an article written by Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek, yep.
So, did you see that video in the article he wrote recently?
Yeah.
So, in which he talks about, apart from what led to what millennials are today, so that's done and it's history, and he says it's no fault of theirs because it has to do with parenting and environment and technology and so on, and instant gratification. But there are 3 or 4 things, and they're simple things that he mentions that what you can do to help them. Organizations, he's talking about organizations, and organizations which are now driven by numbers and business. He says 3 or 4 things, and he says assist and teach them to balance life with technology, all right? Teach them tolerance and patience because they want instant gratification. And he gives examples because, you know, you want to buy something, you don't have to wait, you just go online and you buy something. You want to watch a movie, you don't have to wait to plan with your friends, you instantly go and watch it online. So it's instant high, it's dopamine, it gives you a high. Apart from substance abuse, which is also another problem within this group, but that's another story. And help them build their social skills and self-esteem, right? Because they're just children of where their interface and time with technology is so much that it has taken them away from EQ, which is actually moving forward. Patterns say that the future of the workplace belongs to people who engage with technology, which is true, but then EQ skills actually become equally important. You should still know how to teach them and develop that skill aspect because they still have to work. I mean, this is something that I thought was not only interesting, but quite crisp and simple for organizations to consider. Apart from all the other things, you know, the experts have spoken today, and I'm sure will speak tomorrow.
It's interesting because I think one of the other key concepts that comes up when you mention Simon Sinek is the reverse mentorship aspect, and how that works is basically having a mentor who is younger than you rather than mentoring somebody who is younger than you. You know, and so for a lot of executives, this has become something new to try, where it allows them to actually utilize their expertise, but to gain insight in a way in which is empowering for somebody who is a millennial, may not be very vocal about their opinions otherwise, but may be able to offer in a structured setting some kind of a facilitated you know, way to provide their feedback on how they could contribute or what they think should be changed. You know, and so for the quieter millennials, you know, I think that might be a very interesting option to explore, especially for those who are paired with some very senior level executives. It's always nice to see both sides of the coin, the very experienced and the very new, and to see how those two things could meet. So again, thank you very much. For those of you who have joined us and for those of you who have contributed to the panel today, unfortunately our time is up today. I wish this particular segment could go on for ages because, you know, we're tapping into a wealth of information here, but we've all had very, very full days, and I do thank our audience as well for your time, your attention, your fantastic questions as well.